Hello everyone and welcome to another Thursday. That means it's another Gear Talk. So you're probably wondering why I don't have the Lance throughout like we always do. Well, today's Gear Talk is a bit more somber. We're not going to have it sad the whole time. It's going to be a celebration really, but recently Peter Jason, the voice actor for Dizzy Wallin, my favorite character in the series, he did recently pass away. In fact, the last Gear Talk I did, it was announced that he passed away when that video came out. So I was kind of sitting there like, dang it, I wish I would have known earlier. I'm not hoping he would have passed earlier, but I wish it would have been more a later on video I would have done so that when I came to it, I would have been like, oh, let's do Dizzy's video instead. But it was the same day, it already came out, so here we are. We're doing Dizzy Wallin's video today in honor of Peter Jason. It's my favorite character of all time, like I said. I love Dizzy, he's a great character. I was saving him for the Delta series because he basically becomes like the honorary member of Delta, just like with Jace later on. And Jace has been a part of Delta before, and technically at one time, Dizzy was too. We'll get to that. But I figured it would fit well if we did him with all of Delta, since he made it to the very end of the war, Victory Day, and there he was with everyone else, standing amongst the survivors like Sam, Jace, Marcus, Baird, Cole, Clay, all of them. I wanted to save it for that, but we find ourselves here in honor of Peter. We're going to talk about all of this, so let's get into it from the very beginning all the way through his entire history with the Cog. It's very funny when you look at it when it comes to Dizzy's story, because Dizzy is like the reverse, or at least the book version of Jace. Jace gets a lot of fleshing out in history and his backstory in the comics, and then you get a little bit of him in the books. It's kind of the opposite when it comes to Dizzy. Dizzy gets a lot of fleshed out moments. He gets a lot of his history, his entire history, in the books, and you get him a few times and towards the latter end of the entire series. So it's kind of just a mirror of one another. You get Jace very heavily if you're looking at comics. You get Dizzy very heavily when it comes to the books, and the books are very long, so it's not like all of it is Dizzy. When it comes to Jacinto's Remnant, you get him returning, and then later on, I believe it's Anvil Gate or Coalition's End, you actually start getting his full backstory and what's going on. So we're going to start at the very beginning, talking about how he started off his entire journey and leading from civilian to stranded to Cog to technically stranded again, and we're going to cover it all for you. So Dizzy, we start his entire story actually when he's roughly in like his mid-30s, mid to late 30s, and this is kind of more of like covering what he was up to during E-Day. We never get his entire history of when he went back to like a child or anything. He didn't have it where he was growing up with E-Day. He was growing up during the Pendulum Wars, so he was during that entire era right there. We start off with him. He's a part of the Merchant Navy, so he's returning back from working on the seas, and they're actually going to Port Ogari. Now it's important to state, even though they're pulling into Port Ogari, it's actually Matino Junction is where Dizzy calls home. That is his home, Matino Junction, but they're pulling into Port Ogari, which is, and I have it right here, this is over off of the Saragar Peninsula. The Saragar Peninsula is its own country. That is just off of Tyrus. So with the Cog, you have it where you have all these countries that fall under Cog, like allied with them or control. So this peninsula is actually one of the countries that is with the Cog fully. So it's kind of like America when you have the states. You know, every state is a part of America. You have these different countries that are part of the Cog, and then you have allied countries that are like the Southern Islands, which they're not a part of the Cog, but they support and fight with the Cog. Much like with America, we have like Puerto Rico. That's like a territory of ours, but that isn't actually one of the states. Obviously, the Cog is bigger. We're talking countries at this point, but just kind of an idea of it. So they're pulling in, and he's looking out at the sunset and everything, and he actually takes a flask he has when he's off of the side of the boat, and he hurls that thing into the ocean. At the time of E-Day, when we first get introduced to Dizzy, when it comes to chronologically, we see that he's actually trying to give up alcohol. Now, he's a drinker, but he's not a heavy drinker like he is later on in the story. He gets a lot heavier into it all, and we'll cover why, but at this point, he's more of just like a little bit above a casual drinker, and he wants to quit. He figures giving it up, just having a new lease on life. Even some of the crew even says, "You look like a new man, Dizzy," as he's getting a cup of coffee for him, and he's like, "Yep, I want to start right. I'm going to be right. I'm going to be there for my family. You know, this is the end of the Pendulum Wars. It's about time we have some new starts." And it just so happens this is 6 weeks after, so you know what occurs. He's looking out, he's watching the sunset, when all of a sudden, as they're pulling into the port, they actually see a fire start off over at the port. And at first, Dizzy doesn't think much of this. He must be like, oh, there must be like an accident or something going on over at the refinery, whatever, until the captain of the ship calls everyone up to the bridge in order to see what's going on. Once he makes it up to the bridge with the rest of the crew, they start to hear things on the radio of just like, there's an attack going on. This is more than just a fire. There's an actual battle, an actual big something is going on. And at first everyone's just like, well, it's the peace. Everything's supposed to be done. Dizzy thinks to himself, like, is it the UIR? The UIR, like, it would only be the UIR that would actually go against the ceasefire and the treaty to the war. It must be them. And then you hear like, no, this is not the UIR apparently. Whatever it is, this is not human that's attacking. And this scares everyone. Because again, up until then, no one knew what a locust was or a drone or anything, or they've never made their presence known. They've only known about humanity. So this is a very terrifying moment for everyone. They're like, what are you talking about? And they're getting more information. Like, this is not just the port that's being attacked. This is the entire world that's being hit apparently. And they're just like, well, what's going on? What other places are hit? And they hear about Jannermont. So if anyone read the comics for Rise of Rom, you should know Jannermont was like the ground zero of E-Day. That's where E-Day was like the heaviest. Now, obviously, there were other main areas that were hit, which we're going to get into one actually very soon. But the main area where Rom and Scourge arose, that was over at Jannermont. So luckily, they're not near Jannermont. They're actually on the water. So they're like the safest place you could be during E-Day is on the water. They do hear about what's going on, and they decide like, we need to get in, but we can't port over at Ogari now. Ogari is being attacked heavily. They're rerouting us. And they are sent over to, I have it here, Cape Ilis. Cape Ilis is where they are sent over to, and they actually start to make the trip there, and they're going to be porting there and getting off. And it's later said by the captain once they port, hey, once everyone gets on shore, don't follow any formalities, anything, just leave. Go and get to your families as quick as you can wherever they are. Go and just get going. So everyone gets on land, and obviously, just like the captain said, everyone makes a break for their own destinations for where their cities are. And we actually have Dizzy who's making his way over to Matino Junction. Matino Junction is also one of the sites for one of the giant E-holes that emerged during E-Day. Since he's making his way to Matino Junction, I should actually reference his family that he's going to. So we do know a little bit about his original family, and we know that his wife was Lena, and he had an adoptive son named Richie. Richie was an enlisted gear, while Lena was basically like your stay-at-home wife. So he was making his way back to Mateo Junction. 3 days skip by, and we finally see he is still trying to travel there. Now, he has mostly been going on foot or catching rides, and on the third day, he's actually able to catch another ride, and this one actually takes him to New Sheriff. New Sheriff is a town that's pretty close to where Mateo Junction is. This is actually where Richie was stationed since he was enlisted. So he gets a ride, and he's actually making his way there. Through the radio, he actually learns that these things are called locusts. They've been attacking throughout the entire planet. The death toll is beyond repair. So this is like end of days information he's kind of hearing. Like, imagine like you are a human in this world, like our world. Imagine our world, and out of nowhere, the entire planet, subterranean creatures rise up and kill off a quarter of the population in one day, and the death toll is rising throughout the next few days. I don't know about you, that is a major freak out among the planet. So the entire world kind of like him traveling on foot because he can't catch a ride or because there's no vehicles out makes sense. And then this one person, you know, sooner or later he had to catch a ride there. But 3 days of traveling in order to get a ride, and he finally makes it to New Sheriff, where he gets more information of everything about what's going on. And he finally makes it like up to a hillside that's looking over Mateo Junction. And he sees Mateo Junction, and it is basically just on fire. There is death and destruction everywhere in the distance. So he's like on a hill looking over like miles away, and he sees it. He starts to book it. He starts sprinting as quick as he can to try and run to the city so that he can at least see what's going on with his wife. And as we know, Richie is still battling, and he assumes Richie's going to be out on the field, but so he's trying to make it home to Lena. While he's running, he starts to lose like his breath. He's getting tired. He's been running for miles and miles, 3 days of traveling, and while he's traveling, a pack horse comes across him filled with cog gears. So he's still trying to make it. He's running. He's freaking out, and they pick him up, and they're just like, and it's very important right here is where like you get the mindset of how Dizzy views the government in general just by seeing like the cog here. He gets picked up by them, and these are very nice gears. They aren't your like very stereotypical how like you see like the what are you doing, civilian, get out of here. No, these are very caring individuals, and they actually pick him up like, sir, what's going on, are you all right? You can't go there, it's not safe. The entire city is being just razed to the ground by these creatures right now. And he says, I need to get home, I need to see what's going on. Like, have people been evacuated, what's happening? And they tell him like, yes, people have been evacuated, but barely anybody. Like, this city has been hit so hard, there's like almost no survivors that have made it out. We're going to take you to a refugee camp to get you into safety. And Dizzy's against it originally. He begrudgingly decides, like, yes, I will, because he is very worn out, he is tired, and they do take him. And he does see them as very kind individuals. He sees soldiers in general as being very kind, like, I keep saying kind, but you'll see what I mean with the gears he interacts with compared to, like, later on how Stranded see the cog. But he sees the soldier side of things, like, these are good people. These are just people in general. They're not trying to go out and go against the civilians. These are just people from different walks of life that have different views. It's not like the government that has one view. Every soldier is different. He sees Richie as being a good person, a good kid, his child. He sees these cog as being like, okay, these people are caring about me and making sure it's fine, and they're going to go fight the good fight. So he goes to the refugee area where he actually falls asleep. He passes out from exhaustion, and he is awoken by a sheriff in the town, and he actually learns through the sheriff that they got the death count of what's going on and some civilians accounted for, that his wife has actually passed away. And to make it even worse, he passed out from all this after, while the COG soldiers were bringing him here, they got on comms and actually learned about, because he was talking to them about his son on the way there, they learn about Richie, and they're just like, we just got word that his tags have been taken and he is KIA at the moment. So Richie passed away. He gets to the evacuation area, like the refugee area, and that's when he learns that Lena has also been killed by everything at Matino Junction. And Dizzy is the last of the Wallins, and he doesn't take it that well. With Dizzy's story, it does cut around a little bit too. Like, there's a lot of time skips that happen in his story because of the fact that there's a lot of times he stays stationary, or he's not doing a lot, or he's in one place, which, like, you have, like, other characters in the story, like you'll have Jace, where he's doing a lot of stuff in between. There's a lot of jumps, but you do get a lot of stuff later on about what happens in between there. But you do get Dizzy stuff, and this takes place 3 months after he learns of his family's death, and he is currently, like, he's in a depression still, and he's gone back to drinking. Obviously, if you just quit alcohol the day everyone died, you're kind of going to jump back on, probably. No judgment. It's very horrific what's going on. But 3 months later, you see that he actually is working volunteer work for the COG as a civilian, and his job is actually to go out, find red flags that are placed by scouting teams, and go to them, like, move debris, find the deceased bodies of individuals or soldiers, get them out of there so they're able to take them away. So his job is basically to go find the dead. That is his job. To find red marks that they have been placed, go get them, and move them out. And he is currently stationed, and this is 3 months after E-Day, he is stationed at Halvo Bay. So everyone who knows Halvo Bay, that's the events of Gears of War Judgment, which takes 6 weeks after E-Day. So this is roughly another month and a half that has passed. So there's still fighting that's going on in some areas, but mostly Halvo Bay is gone. Like, there's nothing really left. It's just finding the deceased now. So the Locusts have kind of moved away from that. Like, once a Locust finishes up in a city, like the entire force, yeah, there's going to be a lot that'll stay around kind of like for their territory. But mostly it's like they're moving through like a plague of Locusts. Like, they'll destroy anything in their wake and continue moving forward. That's the battle strategy. That is why they are called Locust. So there are still some in the area, but there's not a militia, there's not a base or anything. They don't leave bases in cities. It's just a razed and destroyed city where they're finding the bodies. They go there, and while he's searching through everything, there are other survivors that are there, other civilians, and they're talking to him like, you know, hey, like, are you planning on enlisting? Like, you know, have you heard recently, like, a lot of people are choosing to go off into the wilderness and survive off of, like, the wild forestry areas and kind of, like, go off the grid. You know, have you thought of doing that? And he talks about that one. He's like, you know, I've thought about it, but I don't think I'm at that point yet of actually going off and going into the wilderness. We learned that some civilians have done that. It's not just a one-person thing. People have done that in order to get away from the entire war, like, going on across the planet. And when they asked him to enlist also, he says no, he's not ready to enlist. He doesn't want to enlist. And by the sound of how they make it looks like as long as he works as a volunteer, a civilian volunteer, he's not going to get drafted. I had to read into it a little bit. It seems like as long as he's working on finding the bodies, it looks like they've promised him, like, you will not be drafted after all, you know, like, you're currently working for us, we're not going to draft you if you are currently working with the COG. But it seems like if he was not a volunteer, they would draft him into the service. So he decides he's just going to continue working volunteer work, and they go around and they keep lifting debris. They're doing all this throughout the day. He's still got a shot in him here and there, and they come across a debris field where they lift everything up, and you hear groaning. And while he's lifting and moving debris, he sees the person in front of him is not a dead body. It's someone that's alive. And obviously this is like, oh my goodness, someone's alive, someone's here. So they're able to get all the debris, and they get her, and they're able to pull her in. You learn her name is Rosalind. And Rosalind is sitting there wondering if the locusts are still around or anything. And it's like, no, they're gone. And at that moment, it's kind of like Dizzy makes a connection with her, and he says, like, hey, come on up, we'll protect you, I'll keep you safe. So we jump 10 months later, and we learn that him and Rosalind are now in a relationship, and she is currently pregnant. Now we jump over to Angares, where they have called Barbeo their new home. So they are now in another area altogether, another country of the Cog, which is off of Tyrus again. And they're actually sitting there, and they're trying to figure out, like, what's going to be happening. Well, Dizzy is, at least. He's figuring out what he's going to do for work, because it's like he wants to do the merchant navy, but there are no ships or anything because of the war and the lack of manpower, and everything's going to the war effort. So there's no work for Dizzy. So he's, again, there's still civilians at this time, which is going to change in a few moments, but he's trying to figure out what he's going to do for work. At one point, he even stops at a bar, and he's just going to get a drink. While he's sitting there, he overhears on the radio about the hammer strikes that are going to be occurring from Chairman Prescott. So this obviously throws him into a bit of a panic along with everybody, and he actually makes it home over to a worn out car dealership where they're calling home right now, because again, even if you're a civilian, it's not like you're still living in your home in lavish luxury or anything like that. Like, you are trying to find somewhere to live at this point. So he makes it back to Rosalind, where he's like, okay, we gotta go. He explains everything to her, and she's just like, what? They're just gonna strip glass the planet. Like, there's no way. There's no way. And Dizzy is just like, no, trust me. I heard it myself. We got to get going. So they actually make their way over to the train station. They're going to try and get a train to take them to Jacinto. Jacinto will be the one place that is not hit. And they give like 3 days in order to get to Jacinto, and everyone can be safe that makes it there. So they're trying to get there, but they are turned away from an officer, a police officer. And he's just like, no, you can't. Like, everything's already taken up. Everything is boarded. We can't keep putting people on the trains. We can't do that. And they're trying to figure something out, and they're going crazy. While they're walking away, they plan on, like, they'll just walk there or run there. They'll find some way to get to Jacinto. While they're going, there's just a calm man that's sitting, like, just outside of, like, a cafe, just, like, drinking a drink or coffee or something and just relaxing, not even worrying about anything. And they're looking at him like, what? Didn't you hear what's going on? Why are you just sitting here? What? And you see that this man is just sitting there and looks at him very calmly. I imagine he's like a prim and posh individual, like, ah, you silly bastard. Ah. You see, do you really think that the government would decide to just glass the entire planet and kill us all in order to deal with the locust? No. This is obviously some form of scare tactics to scare the locust. Ah, yes. I can tell you right now, we're fine. This is just some ploy by the government. We're okay. Trust in the cog. We'll be fine. And Dizzy hears this and looks around and looks at him and is just like, what? Basically, he's under the impression, Dizzy is, of just like, I have no plans of risking that when I have a wife who is pregnant with my child. Children, we learn later. Yeah, we're going to run even if we have to. And it's at this point, too, Dizzy starts to really loathe the government of learning of this. Like, again, the soldiers he sees as fine, but the government starts to really grind away at Dizzy. He's like, why would the government decide to kill all of its people? This just doesn't make any sense. Why the hell? Again, he doesn't blame soldiers. The soldiers are just enlisted to do their job. He sees the government as just, you are choosing to kill us all. This is your choice. Now, of course, we learn from Prescott's story, like, this is a very hard decision, and this was like the last-ditch effort. There were not a lot of options left. But in Dizzy's perspective as a civilian, it's like, we are all about to die by the government's decision. Like, we don't even get a say in this. And we have 3 days to make it to another country and make it to their capital. I guess we don't have a choice. So as the time is going for these 3 days, they actually decide the only way that they're going to make it, since there's no vehicles, there's nothing you can do for a train or travel or airplanes, the only thing they have the option of doing at this point is just walking. So they take 3 days and start traveling. And on the 3rd day, they barely make it across the border into Tyrus. And they're trying to make it when they realize there's like 3 minutes till the hammer strike begins. Like, they do not have much for time anymore. So wondering what's going to happen or trying to figure something out, while they're traveling, they actually come across, because they do hop a car at one point and make it a little ways, but this is like after they cross the border. So they make it up to like an abandoned like general store or like a gas station. So they get there and Dizzy's just panicking, trying to figure out what to do, because again, he's got his wife with him and she's pregnant, and he's like, screw it, we're not going to make it, we have to figure something out. So at this point also, it's very sad, because Rosalind, who is pregnant, kind of just accepts fate. She kind of just accepts, like, Dizzy, just, we did what we could do. We tried to make it there. We're not going to. You know, like, let's just accept what's going to happen. Like, we have each other. Like, yeah, the children are with and they're not born. You know, it's sad that we couldn't have our children. But we just have to accept what's going to happen. Like, what else do we do? And Dizzy is firmly not giving up. So he looks at it like, I have my wife, I have my child, I have to figure something out. So they get to the back room of this gas station, and Dizzy's looking around like, sit there, I'm going to figure something out. And he starts boarding up all the open areas of this back room, like doors, everything. He boards it all up, and the hammers are about to drop. And he's basically there with his wife, hidden in the back of this gas station. And he's like, all right, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, while they're there, a bright light, brighter than they've ever seen, appears through the cracks of the doors of the boarded up areas, and it's just brightness outside. And it's just like, it looks like they're surrounded by light. And then it all stops. And they're kind of like, what? And then they hear loud winds coming from everywhere, like, just this giant gust, like you'd see off an explosion. They hear that. And then everything goes quiet. To them, they're like, we're still alive. It turns out the area they're at, because the hammer strikes were going to hit the world, but they were aiming at the major areas the locusts were, or major cities. Since they were on the outskirts of Tyrus, and they actually were inside of like an abandoned area where it was just this gas station, the hammers did not hit them. Again, they're not going to aim at just a gas station in the middle of nowhere. It goes off, and they're safe. And they're sitting there like, okay, we're fine. Well, okay. Later on, there's another bright light that appears outside. Now, they don't really know what's up with this light. Now, nothing else is happening around them. So Dizzy actually looks outside. He gets outside and looks out, and he sees that everything is like coming down in like snow. And he's like, snow, the reflection off of the snow. And he's like, it's what? It's like, it's not even close to winter right now. Upon further inspection, you see that this stuff that's falling and being reflected off of is actually ash. You look out into the distance, and you see that the city in the distance where the hammer did hit is basically just on fire. It is nothing but, like, he saw Port Ogari and that was bad. This is nothing but just like, basically this is what Char became. Basically that's what he's looking at. It's just this city of death, ruin, on fire. There is nothing. And he is just taken aback in awe. And to really kick him in the nuts harder, right before he went out to look and he was surviving all this with his wife, Rosalind, she hits him with a bombshell. She says, hey, I'm pregnant and I'm going to be giving birth soon. I want you to know, Dizzy, twins run in my family. So imagine getting that news right before the entire world is about to be destroyed. That is what Dizzy is sitting through. And basically, he just shat a load in his pants. He didn't in the story, but I imagine he's after the chapter ended, that's what happened. Now we jump 182 days later. There's a lot of jumps. And this is where we now find Dizzy and Rosalind and the newborn children, which it's weird in the book because they make it sound like she's very close to having children, but then 182 days later and she gives birth. So, I mean, maybe I misread it. I was under the assumption she was heavily pregnant, but I guess she might have just recently been pregnant within those 10 months. But we cut 182 days. They are now over at Oblivion Central, which is another city they find themselves in, and this is now Stranded occupied. So at this point in the story, the Stranded are now a major thing. The Stranded are a thing that exists throughout the world. The civilians that couldn't make it to Jacinto, basically, not all of them, but most become stranded, and Dizzy is now a part of this group. So he's there, and his job basically among the camp is he's a brewer. So he basically makes distilled moonshine, and he uses that to trade or barter with everyone else in like the outpost or the camp or the city. He uses that as a trading mechanism, and he's like your run-of-the-mill stranded. And over at one of the huts is actually where we find Rosalind, who is with a midwife. The children were just delivered recently, and basically he's making sure everything is fine there and she's okay. While he's going out, he feels like, man, I feel like celebrating. I feel like getting a drink. While he's feeling like that, we see that there's rumbling going around while he's like making his way to his distillery, and he sees rumbling occurring, and the locusts appear. So when the locusts appear, we see that Dizzy is like your standard civilian. Like, as much as like he's a part of like some other things that go on, or he's survived this long, up until now, he's never fired a gun. So he actually goes to battle with the rest of the men. He tells Rosalind, the midwife, and, get the babies, get them over to the shelter. And he goes to fight the Locust. Now, before he gets a gun, I kid you not, this man who has seen Locust now probably a couple times, pulls out and I'm quoting what's on the wiki and in the book also, a big wrench. So like one of the big ones that are like this big, he's got ready to go. He's going to fight off the Locust close quarters with a wrench. So he goes to stand in line with everyone else. Like they're on like a firing line right now, ready. And the Locusts come up and start shooting, and the man next to him who has a hunting rifle gets shot and killed. Once he falls, the hunting rifle falls, and Dizzy looks at it and picks it up. Actually, one of the stranded are just like, pick it up and use it, come on. And he picks up the rifle. He has never fired a gun, so he aims it down, and he fires. Now, he does not know if he hit something or not, but he fires it, and he feels the kick from it. He's like, oh boy, okay, so this is what it's like, okay. So he continues to fire. He has no clue if he's still hitting anything or not, but he's trying. So he keeps on going, and he gets to the point where he runs out of ammo, and he's trying to figure out how to reload. So while he's trying to figure it out, the battle actually ends, and the stranded are victorious in this little bit of a scuffle that goes on. It wasn't a big, giant Locust raid, or else, trust me, stranded do not last long, but they end up surviving and make it out. He finally finishes loading it when the head of, like, the stranded camp comes up to him and says, like, Dizzy, what I'm going to need you to do, I'm happy we made it out, good job and everything, I need you to learn how to master how to use a rifle by the time that happens again. Because if that happens again, and you can't fire anything or shoot or kill anything, we're all going to die. So learn how to fire that thing correctly. See you later. So he leaves, and this is when Dizzy kind of gets the idea of like, okay, time to start training and learning how to use a rifle. While he's actually a stranded over at the city here, he actually comes across Cog that are driving by in an APC, and it's weird. Not really, for Dizzy's character it makes sense, but how he views it is, he feels sorry for the gears that are kind of having to go and battle in like the giant battles that are occurring. He feels sorry for them, because they've got to go out and fight and die and do all of this, and he just still hates the Cog, because the Cog is obviously sending them to do that, but he hates it too because he's like, the soldiers I feel for. They're going out there and fighting, and they're trying to make sure everyone is safe. The Cog is the one that's kind of led to this entire situation with, like, the hammer strikes that occurred, sending the men out to die. He still feels that resentment toward the Cog, but not towards the soldiers, and that still continues on further when we jump 8 years later. We once again find Dizzy somewhere where we have seen before, much like when he was at Halvo Bay. 8 years later, we find him at Alima. So for anyone who's played Shadow of Rom, that takes place in Alima. So actually it's funny too, because timeline-wise, Alima, where he would be right now, this is very close. I want to say this is probably after the events of Shadow of Rom. So Alima basically got destroyed by the Krill, and obviously the Krill did not stay there, they left. Alima, as we see in 2, finally gets sunk. Alima is kind of just like an area for the stranded now. It's kind of just become a stranded outpost. So it's weird to think that just like, he's hopping to all these places right after the events of the games we've played. So after Judgment's done, there he is just working, finding bodies. After Shadow of Rom, there he is just living as a stranded. And it's just weird. He's just globe-trotting throughout all of Cog territory during his story. But we find him in Alima. This is actually after his wife Rosalind has passed away from an unknown illness that's been spreading, an epidemic of illness throughout like the stranded outposts. So my first impression of this was like, oh, she died in the bring up sickness. It must be like rust lung or something lambent involved. But I had to think about that. We don't get the rust lung like major epidemic unless you've been around emulsion before, and also because of the fact that lambency doesn't really affect everyone and turn you lambent human. Like, it doesn't affect you that much unless you're around it a lot or you inhale it. So Rosalind and the rest of the stranded, I am believing this is actually just an actual disease that is spreading through, and it is killing the stranded. I believe this is just an actual disease you would find. I don't think this is anything major conspiracy-esque. It's just a sickness, I think. So it goes through, and Dizzy is very heartbroken, and he goes deeper into his drinking because of this. So he starts drinking a lot more. He tries not to around his daughters, and he really much does not like drinking in general because it makes his daughter sad. They believe, like, if you keep doing that, we don't want you to die. We're going to take the place of mom. You smell like alcohol again, Dad. And he feels very bad about that. He doesn't like that he seems like a drunkard in front of his children, or that he is a drunkard. He doesn't enjoy that at all. He wants to to give it up again. And that's what I really like about Dizzy's story, is that he wanted to originally give up drinking, but it pulls him back in because of the fact that, like, the vices are the only comfort he has, the only thing that makes him cope. He even tells his kids that, you know, he does it when he really misses their mom. So it's just, I enjoy the depth of his character. I'm straight edge, so I don't drink, smoke, or anything. But I can appreciate in a story when you have a character who has the flaws of, like, alcoholism, who ends up, like, wanting to really get away from that, but is constantly pulled in. And we even see he embraces that by creating, like, moonshine for others to drink, other soldiers, other stranded. He does that in order to help, like, celebrate or take the edge off from people. So he's not even doing it just, like, getting drunk in an alley and passing out and pissing himself. Like, he's doing it in a way to, like, make things easier for people. And I very much appreciate that in the character story, for Dizzy's story. One reason I very much enjoy Dizzy is that he is a person that laments about his own vices and he wants to quit, but he understands, like, hey, the world is on fire, people are dying, this is, like, one of the only way to bring joys to some people's lives. I ain't got a lot of options here. Like, it's like, what? Just go cold turkey in the middle of everyone dying while trying to protect my children? He's like, yeah, like, there's bigger problems than me having a drink now and then. And I appreciate that. I feel like it's a very good view to have, where it's like, I want to imagine, like, you know, later on in his life, spoiler alert, but after, like, V-Day, he goes out and maybe he does get clean and just live a very sobering life. Maybe he does that. Maybe he finally is just like, you know, the world's finally done, in honor of Lena, in honor of Richie, in honor of Rosalind. You know, I'm going to finally stop these vices. Because even Rosalind says, we learned right here in this section, that she even told him, like, you know, like, it's not good for you. Even she was like, hey, you're drinking a bit too much. But that's my tangent on my love of the character's vices. So continuing on, we actually have it where while he's going home, before he sees his children, there's a cog raven that flies over and drops just pamphlets among pamphlets among pamphlets among pamphlets among the stranded camp in Alima. And he gets angry at them too. He's like, now the cog is going ahead and getting my city dirty with all of these leaflets everywhere. Isn't that marvelous? So he actually picks one up and it says Operation Lifeboat Initiative. And he's just like, what the heck, Lifeboat Initiative? So he kind of just takes it and stuffs it in his pocket for right now. And he kind of just has that as, like, a side thought in the back of his head. A couple days go by after this where he's kind of running errands of, like, delivering shipments of moonshine to people and trading for resources of, like, food and things like that. And while he's doing this within the days, he thinks to himself, like, you know, the COG probably have, like, the medicinal, like, items or, like, the technology that it probably could have saved Rosalind's life. And he thinks about his own family, and he thinks about the COG in general, and he's just like, you know, yeah, it could have saved Rosalind, but they're using this disease and pandemic that's sweeping through my people right now in order to recruit them, in order to get more soldiers so they can throw them all to the wood chipper to fight the locusts. And he's just like, you know, again, his disdain of the COG is still there, but he's like, you know what, I got other things I gotta do, I got a family to worry about, I'm gonna deal with this. So he makes his deliveries and returns where he meets the girls, and like we talked about earlier, you know, they smell the alcohol on him and they're not the happiest. Like, they still love him. They're just like, Dad, you smell like it again, and it's just like, Dad, we don't want you to die, and he feels for that. Really, he is. He's like, don't worry, kids, I'm not gonna die, everything's gonna be fine, everything is going to be okay. They sit down and have a meal where you learn that the girls, which I haven't even mentioned their name up till now, it's Marilyn and Teresa are their names. I always forget Teresa's. I remember Marilyn's, because Marilyn comes up now and then, but it's always Teresa, I forget. So Marilyn and Teresa. So they're actually taking the role of Rosalind at home. Like, they're doing the duties of, like, making food, cleaning, like, they're doing all of that. And they're only, like, 8 years old right now. And they're handling all that while Dizzy's going out and, like, trying to provide the resources for the home. So the night hits, they have a nice time at home as a family, and he actually, you learn where Dizzy sleeps throughout most of his nights. He actually sleeps towards the front of the door with a rifle, and he has it there in case anyone tries to come in and rob them, because, again, stranded, they're not the most morally upstanding. If anyone tries to rob them, or if the locusts do attack, he is ready to fight on a moment's notice. So he has probably spent that 8 years training on how to use the rifle correctly instead of just hoping on figuring out how to reload. Throughout the days, this is like his routine normally, and normally before bed, he always checks his girls to make sure they're okay, and one night, the night before he goes to sleep in front with his rifle again, he actually feels their heads and thinks he feels on Marilyn that she might be a little bit warmer than normal, and he hopes that it's just in his head, but she says, like, she feels fine, everything's good. She says she feels warm, but everything's okay. So they go to bed, and in the middle of the night while he's guarding the door, you actually hear coughing, and it's just like, what? and he goes over to check, and it's actually Marilyn who's coughing. He feels her. She's getting a lot warmer, and she even says, like, Dad, I feel sick. I don't feel good. And he's trying to figure out what to do. He's actually panicked because he's like, if this is the same thing that happened to Rosalind, I'm going to lose one of my daughters right now. So he actually heads out to another stranded that's a former nurse, and she kind of gives her a check over, and she basically says, like, we don't have anything that can help her. The COG would be the only ones, really. And, with what she has right now, it's like, it's a hit or miss. Like, she could pull out of this in a few days, or it could be worse, and she could die. And Dizzy, at this point, does not like that idea. So he's freaking out, trying to figure out what to do, and then he realizes the Lifeboat Initiative, or Operation Lifeboat, however you want to say it, and realizes that the COG probably does have, like he thought of earlier with Rosalind, the technology to save his daughter. He packs everything up. He tells his girls to pack everything up. He grabs Marilyn, and they actually make their way out to the road outside of Alima. So they go there, and he waits there because that's normally the route that the COG will take with their APCs, and he sits there waiting for about an hour. And finally, there's an APC that's coming up. He gets in the middle of the road and waves them down with a flashlight, and they stop and wonder what's going on. And he goes up to them and says, listen, my daughter is sick. She's going to die possibly. I know you guys have the resources. I need someone to look at her. If that means me joining the COG, if that means me becoming a gear, that's fine. I'll do it, whatever that means, as long as she can be safe. Because with the Lifeboat Initiative, the main takeaway from it that a lot of people saw was, you will fight in the war, but your family will be taken care of, they will be fed, everything will be okay for your family. It's a lifeboat. You are given the opportunity to get out of where you are as a stranded. You can be brought in. The COG, they decide, that's going to be more manpower for us, but the soldiers themselves, the ones that Dizzy comes across, say, you know what, okay, that's fine, come on in, we're going to get her to a medic, see what we can do for her, come on along with us. And he gets in there and he continues to plead, I will join your war, I will be your soldier, as long as they are alive and safe, I don't care. You've got it. You've got another soldier. And we do learn Marilyn does survive. She makes it through. So it must be because of the technology or the medicine, or maybe she just did pull through. Who knows? But they are given actual safe refuge with the COG, where his family, his daughters, are now taken care of. And this starts Dizzy's journey as being an actual proper gear. So the first time Dizzy, we see him at least having action, is 5 years into the war. At least from where we left off, 8 years in from when he was at Alima. So 5 years later, he is actually... We're going to talk about continuity here, but he is actually on a squad with Ty, Jace, and Marcus. So Dizzy has fought with Marcus Phoenix before the situation of Hollow Storm. So it's very weird. So continuity comes in because with the comics, continuity is the magic word. So yes, he did fight with them. And I went through and rewatched the cutscenes from 2. And the best I can take from it is... Marcus at least was aware of Dizzy's existence, but maybe didn't know him on a first name basis or something. They fought together. There's no getting around that. Maybe it was a very small routine mission. Maybe, here's my headcanon, head hypothesis. Here's my story to myself. Maybe Dizzy, after 5 years in, he works on rigs or everything, maybe he was actually sent out to go on a mission with Delta Squad, and he was like, we want you to go out, do one field mission just to say you have, and we want you to return to working on everything here. Maybe that's what happened. So he went out with them for a mission, and they finished and came back, and maybe, they met each other, but they were never just like, oh, hey, how's it going? How's your life? Who are you? Because in 2... he greets Delta and brings them on to Betty, his rig. They're like, Dizzy, you conscript? He's like, yeah, join the lifeboat. Someone had to keep the family safe and Daddy had to go and get the groceries, all that. So my headcanon is maybe they've met, but this is the first time they've actually had a formal introduction conversation because Marcus isn't the most talkative guy. Jason and Ty are not there at the moment, so maybe that's just what it was. So after that... that's all after the events of the first Gears of War game. We actually jump over into Gears of War 2, where we have Operation Hollow Storm, where we, as the players, are very first ever introduced to Dizzy Wallin. So Dizzy is actually sent out with his rig. His is Betty. His is actually rig 314 Betty is what he calls them. Everyone who drives the rigs have their own names, like they're truckers. So for instance, you've got Betty, later on you've got Lola, you've got all these different rigs with their own names, but they're all sent out and they're all meeting up in one area so they can travel to land down and they're able to actually dig down. So these are basically grind lifts. Their job is to go and just grind down, and what they're going to do with the soldiers, they're going to load them into these grinders and send them actually down into the hollows to battle. That is Operation Hollow Storm, the first time the COG have had an actual offensive against the Locusts. So his job is to get them there with the grind lift so they can find in land down is where they're heading, and they're able to find the place they're going to be digging down. So he goes out with Delta Squad, and they are making their way through, and they go through battles amongst battles on their way there. It's actually a very fun part of the game because of the fact that while they're going, they're attacked by other locusts that are coming up. They're attacked by corpses, Brumoks, and the entire time, all the rigs are being hit, and they're fighting everything off. At one point, even, they actually get swerved off of the road and end up going down an embankment, and the grind lift gets injured, and while Dizzy gets out to fix things, Delta's got to cover him. So we see throughout his history, and especially here, Dizzy is an extremely good mechanic. Like, he is very well practiced in the art of fixing things. So he's fixing up the big rig, good old Betty. He's fixing her, and we see throughout history too, like as a stranded, he picked up some makeshift skills, especially as a merchant navy. He picked up a lot of it. So they're fixing everything. He finally gets it fixed, and they make their way back onto the road. He needed a few minutes, but he got it all up and going. So they do make it to land down, where now the issue is tickers. So while they're going through, another rig that's following through with them, Lola, actually does hit some tickers and explode and get destroyed. Off of Lola, there is only one survivor, that is Ty Caliso. So they actually do stop their rig for a moment. Ty comes out, and Ty joins up with Delta at the moment and joins up with Dizzy, so they're able to continue the mission. Now, when it comes to Ty, again, they have met before, Dizzy and Ty, because of that operation, but they never talk to each other. So again, my continuity is they just knew each other and like, oh, Ty's here. Come on, let's get going. They make their way over. Now, the entire time they're going through land down, they have to make their way through. Now they got to go through tickers. They got to blow up and get rid of tickers so that Dizzy is able to go through. They got to deal with mortars, so Delta's got to go through and deal with the mortars. There's a Brumok. They got to go through and deal with the Brumok. Like, basically, like, don't get me wrong, like, Dizzy is a pivotal character. He's got to get it there and get them down into the hollows. But it's funny because of the fact that every single time an obstacle comes up, Dizzy's like, well, I don't know what to tell you guys. Like, if we keep going, then we're going to lose Betty. And if we lose Betty, you know, I'm going to die. And if I die, who's going to drive Betty? But Betty's already gone. And who's going to drop you guys down? There's not a lot of other rigs. We got to clear a path, so sorry. You know, I love Dizzy, but it's also just funny because it's just like, Dizzy, park the thing and go help them. Like, I get it. Like, you know, there's locusts in the area, but I'm like, just lock the door, okay? Just lock it. Just boop, boop. Lock the door and get going. Go help them, okay? Like, he's just always like, I ain't driving this through here. Like, just park it and go help. I'm sorry. I love Dizzy, but it's like, just assist. I love you, dude, but go help them. But he does play a major role once they get to the actual dig site, which is like outside the land down graveyard, where we get introduced to probably one of the more badass scenes for Dizzy, and that is when Scourge appears. So Scourge makes his mighty entrance during a giant battle that's going on with the Locusts trying to hold them off while they're loading up and getting the rigs ready to drop down with the grind lifts. So while they're fighting everything off, Scourge does make his way up, cuts a tank in half, it's badass, and he actually jumps onto Betty, about to go after Dom and Marcus, who are already strapped in ready to go. And Dizzy comes out and he says, I'm going to hold him off, guys, don't worry. And I love Dizzy. I love him to death. I think he's a great guy, especially with the history you get from him. Very, very great story. But, if I may say, Dizzy did not have a shot in hell of holding him back. He did not. I'm sorry. I love him, but Scourge is going to kick his ass. But he goes in. He gets his Lancer out and he's ready to go, and he actually goes in to hold him off. And at this point, Dom and Marcus are trying to get free to go and help him, but they can't. They're locked in. Out of nowhere, Ty hasn't dropped down yet. Ty comes running through, and he starts fighting against Scourge, so it's a 2-on-1. At this point, Marcus and Dom drop down, and in the game, we don't know what happens in between this, but in the comics, in Ty's comic, The Quickening, we do get what happens in that situation with Dizzy, Ty, and Scourge. During the battle, Ty realizes that this is a losing situation, that he's going to lose. He realizes, I can't defeat Scourge. I'm not going to. So he tells Dizzy, you got to get out of here. You got to run. Get going. I will hold him off so you can get out of here. And Dizzy does not want to go. He is like firmly against it. But he begrudgingly is like, damn it, okay. And he wishes Ty like good luck. Good luck. I think he says good luck South Islander, but it's like good luck Ty. And he actually leaves. So once he leaves, as far as we're aware, I guess once Ty was defeated, Scourge took him down to the hollows where all the torturing and everything happened. They must have just left. Ty was able to evacuate with Betty. He made it out of there with the rig, and he was able to evacuate out towards Jacinto, I believe he headed back to, or at least towards Jacinto, at least going in that direction. Because again, Landown is a little ways from Jacinto. It's not like they're right next to each other. So he's heading there. And we don't know what happens to Dizzy in the games, especially until 3. If you just play the games, you don't know what happens. But if you read the books, Jacinto's Remnant, that takes place right after Gears of War 2, we do learn what happened to Dizzy. We do learn where he is and what's going on. He is actually evacuated with everyone to Port Farol. Port Farol or Port Farol? I think it's Port Farol. Port Farol is where they were going to set up like New Jacinto. And he gets there and he meets everyone and he's just like, Delta, hey, how's it going, everybody? How's it going? And he's just excited to see him. Like, yeah, I made it out. Like, Ty was able to save me. He told me to get out of there. Where is he? I want to buy him a drink. We can drink together, celebrate. And he sees on all of their faces that everyone is very somber, and he realizes that Ty has been killed. And he asks how, and they explain his death. And he just feels nothing but lament and sorrow, and he can't even say a word until Delta kind of like fills in the gaps, and he notices, Dom does, over in the pilot's chair for the rig, he sees there that there are 2 girls in there. He sees Marilyn and Teresa. And he says, hey, are those your daughters? And he's like, yeah, those are my kids. Yeah, Marilyn and Teresa. Go ahead, come and meet them. So he meets, and, it's very weird because I've talked about it in other characters' videos, but when it comes to the Locust War, most people's families are dead. Like, Cole's family is gone, Baird's is gone, Marcus's, he thinks they're all gone until Adam is a thing. You have Dom, which Maria, she's gone. Everyone's families are gone. It's mostly just the soldiers fighting for everyone else's future, or at least for them to have their future. Dizzy is one of the only characters that has somewhat of a family still. And the biggest thing I love about all of this, you get from the beginning and you get from the books that are coming up here, is that he is specifically fighting for his family. Now, he's a very kind person. He's not going to be cowardice and choose his family over others. He's going to pick the greater good. But he is fighting for his girls to have a tomorrow. Even in the games when he's downed or something, he even says, my girls. Like, he's thinking of his children. I very much love that. Like, he is like, I am fighting so that they can have their tomorrow. I've gone through my life already. I've had 2 wives. I've had children. I've had adopted children. My life is taken care of. I want my girls to have their future. That is what this is all about. So that is his main goal of fighting. His girls need a future. He is going to provide that. He is their father. I will give them something so that they can at least have something. Give them so they can have more is basically what he's going at. So he decides, let's call it good here. Let's go celebrate Ty's name later on with all of us together. Now, there's a problem with Port Farol when it comes to when they chose that as being like the new capital. And the problem is that they chose to go there during the beginning of winter. And Port Farol is very well known for being like extremely cold and desolate and like this frozen tundra of an area during the winters. Like, it is a very, very hard place to live. Port Farol was actually abandoned because of that mainly. Like, that was one of the reasons. There were other reasons, but that was one of them, was the winters. So the winters hit, and everyone is like in agreement. Everybody of like, this is not going to work. Even if we did make this the capital, we'd have to survive through the winter now, and humanity is already stretched thin as it is. We can't just keep trying to stretch it out more. We have to find somewhere else to call New Jacinto. So they start looking through everything, and it comes down to Prescott like, actually, there is somewhere that might work. It's kind of kept a secret, but it seems we don't really have a lot of options. There's this place called Vectis, which is like out past the abysmal trench where the Locust can't get to. We could go there and see what it's like. So everyone's like, you son of a bitch, why didn't you say anything? Again, like, oh, secrets and I'm in charge. All that. So they figure out about Vectis and they're planning to go there and see what's going on. They first have some advanced teams to see what it's going to look like on Vectis. Like, they've done some scouting from like far away, and it looks like there is a city there. There's a cog flag still. And the people that are chosen to go there are Delta, and Dizzy is one of them that are also chosen to go. So Dizzy is one of the advanced teams to go and check on Vectis and see what Vectis is like. After they go and see that Vectis will work for where the cog is stationed, they go there and everything is explained to Vectis, because Vectis doesn't know about what's been going on throughout the war. They're basically cut off from everything, so they explain everything, and they do know about Stranded, and actually that plays a role into Dizzy's story when it comes to Anvil Gate Coalition's End. So with these 2 books, it dives a lot into the relationship. You have the Stranded insurgency, but it dives into the relationship amongst the Stranded and how the COG see the Stranded, or at least how the civilians even see the Stranded, because Dizzy is a former Stranded, and he carries that with him. It's not like he's choosing to be like, oh yeah, I'm former Stranded, what now? No, it's not like that. He is stranded and he became a cog soldier. That's just how he sees it. Like, I am cog now. So he goes to a bar with the rest of Delta one time when they're at Vectis. This is like very, very recently, like when they first got onto the island and started moving things there. This is like a few days in. So they go to the bar there to have a drink, as Dizzy does. He goes there along with Delta. I think it's just Marcus and Dom, and Bernie is there also with him. So they go there, and the Vectis civilians are very, very, very against Stranded. They do not like the idea. Vectis civilians have always been a part of the COG, so they see the Stranded as just like, you abandoned the COG. How could you do it? Like, they really start giving him shit, and they're about to kick him out until Marcus, Dom, and Bernie stand up for him and say, no, that shit ain't happening. Like, no. He is a COG soldier. He has fought and died. He has fought and almost died many times. He has saved my life. Marcus is like, he saved my life. Like, all of them are like, he has saved us. He is like a COG soldier. And everyone kind of backs off. And one of them comes up to Marcus and just like, you're Marcus Phoenix. Like, you're the hero of Asheville Fields. Like, you got the Embry Star. And that's when Dizzy's like, whoa, wait. You guys are war heroes? What? And then it's just like, they're all like, yeah, we're war heroes. Like, me and Dom's saying this. Me and Marcus both have the Embry Star, and then Bernie here has, and I got hers written down because I kept forgetting her medal for some reason. She has the Sovereign's Medal. So the Embry Stars are like the highest honor you can achieve, while the Sovereign's Medal is like basically you're like considered like a war hero, or like you did very, very good during the war or something like that. It's a very prestigious medal, but the Embry Star is like the highest you can achieve. There's also another funny part I kind of just want to mention here because it's funny. So the funniest thing is that like the Vectis naval base is kind of where like the COG are having their barracks, or like where he lives basically, and you have like, he has his girls with him too, like that's their home right now, but like it's basically like a barracks. So he goes there, and it's so funny to me because only Dizzy in the story would do this. He sets up a moonshining distillery in the back of the naval base. So he sets up a distillery to make moonshine. And by all accounts, by what we hear about the characters in the story, Dizzy makes extremely strong moonshine, but it's very good moonshine. So he makes shine, and it's funny, and I'll give you a little bit fun family history for me in a second, but he makes it, and the first night he makes a bar in the barracks. He serves as the bartender to everybody there. So it's funny because he just makes all this moonshine and makes a bar, and he's like, yeah, everyone come on in and have a drink here. Have some of Dizzy's shine. And I love it. So it's funny because like my family, like our ancestry, like on my father's side, we go back towards Tennessee. Like generations and generations and generations and generations ago. And this was like bootlegging times, and my family were some of the people who would they knew how to produce and deliver. So my ancient history, you know, on my father's side, is we were moonshiners. And it's so funny because I'm straight edge and I'm like, I don't do any of that, but towards the further ends of my family history, yeah, we're shiners. So it's funny, I can relate to Dizzy, like, sounds like the great Booker's legacy right there. The great grandpappy making his shine. So, I don't know. I always thought it was funny. So during the entire Stranded insurgency, there is actually a situation where, you know, not only are they dealing with the Stranded, but they offer the Stranded, because they're dealing with Vectis, which has a major Stranded problem of, like, the Stranded throughout the islands are attacking Vectis now and then and stealing their supplies, which might play into why they don't like the idea that Dizzy was former Stranded. But they're dealing with that, and while they're dealing with the Stranded, they offer them amnesty. They offer, like, hey, for the Stranded that want to actually join the COG, now that we are here and we are defending Vectis, if you choose to join us, you're wiped clean, your slate's good, you are a civilian again, you're good. If you don't choose to take amnesty, we're going to be hunting you down. Now, they don't say it like that, but the Grozny do, because during this time, a little bit after the Stranded insurgency, while this is going on, you have the Grozny have appeared and now joined up with the COG. That's a long story right there to explain that history and how that happened, but let's, for Dizzy's sake, the Stranded and the Grozny are now joining the COG, and Hoffman actually trusts Dizzy with his life. Like, Dizzy is a very well-known gear at this point that is trusted by the higher-ups like Hoffman. So Hoffman goes up to him and says, hey, because of your history, because of everything, and because I trust you, I need someone to watch over the Stranded side of the camp and make sure everything's going good, or if there's problems, you report to me. So I need someone in charge of that. So Dizzy becomes like the pseudo, like, watcher, like lead watcher for when it comes to like the Stranded. And during this time with all three sides, the Grozny are a lot more like thick-headed and like, oh yes, comrade. That's how they act Russian and Ukrainian, that kind of stuff. They go over there and they're picking fights with the stranded. In fact, there's a situation where there's a little girl who's being like basically like not assaulted, but basically like bullied and about to be assaulted by the Grozny, and this angers Dizzy to high hell. Because Dizzy was a stranded. He understands, like, especially the ones going for amnesty, he understands that. Like, he took the lifeboat initiative. Basically, he took the same deal as they did. And he sees that as just like, no, like, what the hell is going on here? And he steps up for that little girl to defend her. By doing that, though, the Jacinto civilians, go figure, have a problem with that. And they all start beating on him. They start actually kicking his ass. And it's just like... And I'm even looking through my notes to make sure I got this right, because it sounds like I'm making that up. But no, it's like... They just, like, the Jacinto... Like, here, gets pissed with Jacinto civilians, and that happens after he is attacked by them. It takes Dom, Sam, and Marcus to break that up. And he is... This is... I love this scene so much, because it encompasses his character and how he truly... Like, he's kept his mouth shut, but this is where he really speaks out. So he's mostly like... He gets up, and he looks at the Jacinto civilians, and he's like, what the hell? I am attacked because of the fact that I'm defending an amnesty stranded that wants to join and get out of... Like, that was me. I took the lifeboat initiative. I fought for you. I almost died for you. I've saved people. And I'm still not good enough for you? I have spent my life defending your asses, and here I am being attacked because of the fact that I don't want some little girl getting her ass kicked in? And he basically, I guess I'm this far in the video, and he just says, like, you can all go fuck yourselves, okay? And he is like, I'm making it seem very mild. He is he's yelling this. He is pissed off. This is the one and only time Dizzy has actually lost his cool to this extent, and I love it. Because he brings it up, like, I took the same deal. I did. I took the lifeboat, so my girls could have a life. All right? And now you're all going to sit around and start bashing them for taking amnesty? The Grozny are going to cause problems here? I almost died many times. I fought goddamn Scourge, okay? And I'm still here. You know, I'm the reason some of your people are, if you have family in the cock, I'm probably the reason some of them are alive right now. But no, you know, I can go fuck myself, whatever, you know, okay. And he storms off and he just leaves. And I've got nothing against him. I'm like, bravo, Dizzy. 100% with you. We jump a little bit further now after the Grozny have given the cog access to the Embar Star, I believe it's called. It's called the Emerald Star, I believe it's called. The Emerald Star. And that is actually an oil rig that digs down and gets emulsion out of the ground. So they have their own rig, and the Cog have actually done that. And that actually gets attacked by polyps and lambent and gets destroyed. At this part of the story, the lambent are now actually becoming a serious problem, where they are worried after everything that happened over at the Emerald Star, if they're going to be coming to Vectis, and they think it's actually going to happen, which they are correct on. So they start setting traps and start getting everything ready. And during all of this, Dizzy is like setting everything up and getting traps set up so that if they were to attack, you know, they're going to be falling into pits or something where they can just blow them up. And Dizzy's very hesitant on this. He's like, is this even going to work at all? And Hoffman's like, oh, it'll be fine, it'll be good. And worst case, if we can't do that, we'll just have you run him over and just blow him up. And Dizzy's like, tickers were already a problem. What? So cut ahead in the actual battle against the large mass of lambent come through. And Dizzy is actually assisting with Betty. Okay. Earlier on in the story, we don't really need to cover it because it's just a scene with him just saying, like, yeah, trust you's doing, like, stranded hunts, whatever. But there's a scene where he's using a plow. And he's plowing through the roads and getting rid of mines that might be in there. So there's a big-ass plow that can go on the front of Betty. And he has that plow. And during the battle with the lambent, when the giant lambent leviathan is a thing, he's on the ground forces fighting off the polyps. And what he does, he loads up Betty with the giant just plow and just runs all of them into the trenches where they can be blown up. So he's just plowing all of them forward constantly. I think it's funny as ever. And Betty makes it out fine, so he's completely good. So I just think it is the funniest thing in the world, where he's just like, meet me, and just, hey, he makes it, and it's a fine strategy. So, I mean, hey, he makes it through the stranded insurgency and the lambent epidemic, the beginning of it. At the Battle of Vectis, Dizzy is still with us. Towards the very end of their time on Vectis, we actually have this situation where Prescott actually leaves. Now, under their idea, they're seeing is like he's abandoning and leaving somewhere, but we actually learn he is like giving up everything to go and work on Azura full time with things. And leadership is left down to 3 individuals that are left. It's actually I think it's a a tri-committee, or like not tripartisan, but something where it's like three people in charge of a government. And it's Trescu who's in charge of the Grozny. It is Hoffman in charge of basically like the COG civilians and everyone. And then Michelson who's sharing that responsibility, but everything naval-wise with the civilians. So they're all three in charge of everything, and it just comes down to the decision that just like the COG cannot function anymore. We have to leave Vectis. We don't have a choice. So it comes down to the decision. They're all three going to break apart and go their own separate ways. They're still in contact and on good terms. It's just that like some of them believe that their decision's better. For instance, Trescu believes like the Grozny are with me. I will take my Grozny and we will go. I trust we can find someone for the Groznian people. So, and again, they're all on good terms. This isn't just like, screw you guys, Grozny, no. No, they're good terms. Michelson is talking to Hoffman, and Michelson is like, well, I'm probably going to take them out into the waters on some of the ships, and we'll live on the waters, because the lambent, they're not funneling in onto land. They'd have to come up through stocks, which gives them time to fight. So he's going to take them by boat. And Hoffman makes the decision that he is going to take his people that choose to come with him to Anvil Gate. So the three different groups are formed, and we actually have Dizzy deciding that he is going to travel to Anvil Gate. He feels that's the safest option. He knows of Anvil Gate, and they decide to make the travel there. I think it takes them a few days, but when they get there, Dizzy actually likes the look of everything. He likes the look of Anvil Gate, the city of Avangard. Avangard. There's no N in it. Avangard. So they go there, and he likes it, actually. He's like, yeah, this isn't too bad of a place, actually. I think I can raise my girls pretty well here. While he's there at Avangard, they actually takes the time. Dizzy's the one they give to kind of getting power and water running throughout the city. They see, Dizzy at least does, that the generators are still working after all this time. So he actually sees that as a blessing. He's like, well, they're up and going, so I mean, hey, let's get this town going. So he does take his time to go and get the water started. And we cut actually 5 months later on for Anvil Gate to see what's going on. We do have a running society that's actually working now. Dizzy has gotten water and power going. And this is where we continue kind of into the comics, covering the in-between of 2 and 3. We see that Hoffman, even though there's no government anymore, they kind of run it kind of like a government still, like still military-esque. We see that Dizzy is actually in charge of the Anvil Gate convoys from here on out. So when we see him in 3, that's actually him going out on a convoy run. But here, this is where he's making runs back and forth, and they're actually going out to look at trading with the stranded group that's nearby, and he goes with Patrick Sultan, who actually made his way to Anvil Gate separate from the group, and they all meet, and 5 months later, they're running deliveries. So they're making their way there to go and deliver things. And while they're doing that, they come across a few stranded that are in the road that are actually asking for all of their stuff. Now, before they came across them, they were already very privy to things that were coming up. Like, Patrick is a very good sniper and he can scout very well. Well, he saw it coming up, and Patrick actually got out and made his way around the environment behind them. So they think it's just Dizzy and another driver that's with. And they're like, give us all your stuff. You've already taken all the hunting land. If you want to keep hunting, we want everything. They're basically holding him at gunpoint hostage. And during all of this, Patrick makes it behind them and gets them from behind and surprises them and just like, yeah, that's not going to be happening at all. That's not going to happen. And they basically take all their guns and leave. They leave them alive. And they do make it to the stranded outpost where Dizzy's actually worried. Just like, do you think they're going to be decent stranded, or are they just going to be like that again? And Patrick's like, we're all stranded now. Like, it's not going to matter. Like, these are the friendly ones. And they do trade, and they do make it back. They're trading the fur from their hunting for fuel that the stranded do have, because fuel is something that is very highly regarded at this point in the story. On the way back from that delivery, they actually have one of the trucks hitting a pothole. And they think it's like, okay, that's weird. There's a giant hole here. But then they realize, looking at it, this is actually an E-hole. This is something the Locust came from. This is an emergence hole. And Dizzy's kind of shading up, like, do you think they're still around? Patrick says, like, this is a very old one. It's not an active one, you can tell, especially we'd see something around. So they do get out of there and they make their way back and report it. They have another trip that comes on later on, and during this trip they're actually fired upon. Dizzy is, and they're able to get away from them and make it away. You learn later on that this was actually locusts that are still in the area. There's a cave that's outside of the area that they've been inside of, and they've been tunneling down just by hand and by shovel. Like, it's funny to see like an actual shovel in their hand, but that's how they're doing it. And then later on, you have Bernie and everyone go and clear them out. But Dizzy was the one that kind of was able to tell them, like, hey, we had people firing upon us, and they originally thought it might have been stranded. While he is at Anvil Gate, we actually cut forward a year, And actually, all communication that's between all three of the groups is kind of just severed and gone. So there is somewhat connection with the Grozny, but they never really message the Grozny that often. But everything to Anvil Gate, they have no connection to Anvil Gate. They have no idea what's been going on. And that it kind of worries them, because it's like, we don't know if Hoffman's okay, if they're dead, if they're gone. We have no idea. They need to figure out what's going on. You know, the whole events of 3 happen with, like, Adams, Dis, Prescott comes back, hey, you need to make it here, blah, blah, blah. You need to go through the Badlands, and they get a hold of a barge, yada, yada. That's a whole discussion of the games and other characters. But basically, while Delta's making the journey to go to Hoffman, they come across this small city. It's an outpost, an old cog outpost, and they get a distress message from none other than Dizzy Wallin. Turns out that during this time, Dizzy was actually making his way out to trade, and he was making his way back. On the way back, he came across this outpost, and he found out it's filled with ammo and supplies and weapons. So he stayed to go and get it, but while he was getting everything, the Locust came across him, and he was holding off just like a battle of him versus the Locust forces by himself, sending out distress beacons, and that's when Delta got a hold of it, and Delta came down to assist. Once they get down there and there's like a brief interlude of the battle, they're able to talk to Dizzy, and Dizzy's like, Dizzy, you're trying to take on the Locust all by yourself again. He'd be like, you think I would have learned after Scourge, but here I am fighting the Locust again by myself. And they ask like what he's doing. And he's like, yeah, I found all this. We're getting supplies. And they ask about Hoffman. And it's like, is Hoffman still trying to break the data disk and everything? He's like, well, hell, he's been trying every single day. He finally got bored. Like, he couldn't think of how to get it. It just drove him crazy. So, yeah, he can never crack it. And they said, like, hey, we have the key for it. And he's like, well, we got to get back. And then once they get all the supplies, the rest of the Locusts come. They defeat them. They get onto the barge. So they leave behind the vehicle Dizzy was taking to get on the barge because they have to get there quick. And they start flying their way over to Anvil Gate. On the way, they actually get attacked by Mira, and Mira blows down the barge. Everyone ends up crash landing outside of Anvil Gate. While they're making their way there, and before the crash happens, they do see a very large group of Locusts, like a giant battalion, is making its way to Anvil Gate, like siege beasts and everything about to attack. So they're like, okay, not only do we have to get the data, we have to warn Hoffman what's coming. So when they get blown down, Dizzy and everyone survives, and there's a vehicle that pulls up, a few of them, and you see that it's actually Hoffman that found them, and he's bringing them back to Anvil Gate. Once they make it back to Anvil Gate, the giant battle ensues. This is one of my favorite levels in 3, by the way, just the giant battle of holding off. The only thing I enjoy more about Anvil Gate was in 4, when you got the actual, like, towards the V-Day battle that happened. It was really cool. But they're fighting everything off, and Dizzy's there also fighting, and one by one the defenses are falling. Like, they're holding off as much as they can until the last-ditch effort is thrown out and takes them out, and they're able to have a breather, where they're able to finally use the data disk and see what it's been hiding, which is the location of Azura, the last bastion of, like, mankind, basically. And they're trying to figure out how to get there. The Maelstrom's there. Like, how do we get around this? And that's when Dizzy steps up. I think Hoffman recommends a submarine, and Dizzy's like, well, that's where I come in. He's got his hat off and everything, like, yeah, if you can run it, I can definitely get you there. Because, merchant Navy. I keep wanting to say merchant Marines. Merchant Navy. Yeah, I can definitely take care of it, get it fixed up, no problem. So Dizzy will be the one that will actually be getting Delta into Azura, going right under the Maelstrom in a sub. So Dizzy joins them and goes along with them on the adventure to get to Azura. While you have the other squads, like you have Baird and you have Cole going off to find reinforcements, the Grozny, and then you have like Hoffman and Bernie who are staying behind, who will be holding down Anvil, and for their, like, so the ships are gone. The Grozny are nowhere in sight until Baird and them find them. Anvil Gate's like the only place where like humans still are and have a society. So like we're going to be defending here. And that's where you get the kick-ass scene in 4 where they're just defending the last of the walls. Like, oh, I'll take you down, you son of a bitch. You sons of bitches. I love it. But yeah, they make their way over to Concord, or the Concord Airway, I should say, where they have to drive through and make their way through all the Locusts that are there, while Dizzy is driving a tanker truck to get the fuel for the sub. They make their way through Concord, and it's an entire fight. Like, it is very heavily Locust controlled by the Savage Locusts. So they're fighting their way, making their way through, and they're actually making good headway. But there is a downside to all the fighting. While they're going through everything, there are shots being fired at them, and the tanker truck is slowly getting shot up by holes the further they go. You learn that by the time they get to Mercy, where they're getting the fuel for the sub, that, while we were getting here, this thing has taken up holes left and right. There's so much in it, like, I'm going to have to start patching this up in order to get it to actually hold the fuel. So when they get to Mercy, they realize it's deserted, and Mark is like, Dizzy, I thought you said this place had people in it. And Dizzy's like, well, yeah, 2 months ago, like, this place was busy as ever. Like, there was fuel and everything. So they realize that the pumps are all shut down and everything, and it is given to Jason Dizzy to stay behind to defend the tanker, because the Concord Locusts, like, they saw them going through. It's not like they're just going to stay and do nothing. Like, they are coming. Like, they are following behind. They're just a ways ahead. So they're like, you guys stay here and defend the tanker. We're going to go figure out what's going on. While Delta's traveling through, they come across the lambent humans and relay it to Dizzy, and Dizzy's like, oh, shit. So they go through, they get all of that taken care of, and they get the pumps running. And that's when Dizzy tells them, like, you know, it's coming through, we're pumping, but there are so many holes in this thing, it's not holding that well. I'm going to need some time to start patching this up. So then Delta's like, we're going to make our way back. And then Dizzy's like, yeah, by the way, the locusts are coming. They're almost here. Like, we see them coming in the distance right now. Like, you need to get back here quick. So while Delta's fighting off the lambent humans and everything, they make it back, and the locusts are now here, and they're starting to fight. So during this entire fight, and we talked about it a little bit in Jace's video where, like, the positioning was, what happens is that Dizzy and Jace are, like, hunkered down behind one of the trucks. Like, they had to leave the tanker and go to one of the other trucks to hide behind for cover while they're fighting. And then you have Delta, who's up top, which is Marcus, Sam, Anya, and Dom. They're up top on an elevated area, and they're fighting. At one point, Dom gets separated, so you have 3 different groups. Dom is able to make his way over to the tanker truck itself, the truck, and he's able to have it detached, and he goes around and he drives that into the tanker, which causes the explosion from when Dizzy was trying to get it patched up and ready. So during the explosion, because of how close Dizzy and Jace are, they actually make it out of that okay, because the truck they're at, they're able to make it behind cover fast enough where the explosion does not hit them. And then you have everyone up top, which is able to jump away. Unfortunately, this is where Dom is the only casualty, but in the story, also one of the biggest casualties that basically occur. But they do make it out where Dizzy is able to get everyone in the truck. At this point, the Lambent and the Locusts are just done. They're set on fire, ablaze, they're gone. Dizzy gets everyone in the truck, and he's able to drive them to where they were going to go next to check for fuel, and that was Char. Once they arrive at Char, that's where Dizzy says, like, we're out of fuel, we ain't got anything, we have to try Char next, where Jace asks him, just like, are there even any people living here? Because Char is just this giant, destroyed, like, metropolis, basically. Just a giant city of just death. It's just ashen, it's ghostly, and he asks, is anyone even still here? And Dizzy says, like, yep, there are still stranded here, but they are not the welcoming kind. And I want to imagine, like, all the years Dizzy spent as a stranded, he has to know about all the other stranded camps. He has to. Like, I imagine he knows about Char, because it's just, as his time as a stranded even. He's like, yeah, I know Char. Like, we did trades with Char. They're kind of assholes, but we know about Char. So he probably just knows about Char from his days as stranded. So it's told by Marcus, like, Dizzy's going to stay and guard the truck, and while he's guarding it, they're going to be going in. Now, it's also stated that they probably already know that they're here, and that's proven very much correct, because once Delta leaves, you have Griffin's boys over from his stranded crew actually kidnap and take the truck, and they take them back to the camp, where Dizzy later on is used as a bartering chip with Delta that says, go get the fuel and everything, and if you can't get it on time, we've got Dizzy. And they basically threaten they're going to kill Dizzy unless they do what they say. So Dizzy is held hostage while Delta is going out to the other building to figure out what happened with the fuel. Now, while they're taking care of the fuel situation, Dizzy is still held hostage, but the Locusts emerge and start attacking, led by Mira. Mira attacks and starts just going after the tower. A ways into the battle, they actually release Dizzy, and Dizzy continues to fight along with Griffin's crew. So while that's going on, Marcus and them are making it back. He gets comms from Dizzy, and Dizzy's like, you got to stay over there, stay away. Mira's here attacking, like, we're going to hold her off. And they're trying to make their way over there to assist Dizzy, like, we're coming, don't worry. And Dizzy's like, they're fighting. Like, it is a long fight. Like, a lot of people die. The Locusts are taking out people left and right. And they're fighting inside, but it comes down to Griffin and Dizzy in the same room, and they have to make their way to the rooftop because of how, like, bad the Locusts are on the ground. They make it to the roof where Mira is firing down, and they're fighting, and he's like, I don't know how much longer we can hold off. We're stuck. And Delta does make it and fights their way up and is able to fight off everything and keep everyone safe. The only survivors of that tower were Griffin and Dizzy. Dizzy actually survived that. Like, that was so awesome to me. I loved it so much. Because, like, the entire fight, like here's the thing. Like, it shows how much Dizzy has like become a better soldier or like skilled since he first picked up a rifle. Because remember, he picked up a rifle and never knew how to fight. To one of the only two survivors with Griffin, a stranded leader, holding off the top of this tower while Mira's attacking, and the Queen's Guard, those locusts, the big ones, not the big, ranking big, come up to fight. And I'm just like, oh my god, Dizzy, you made it! Oh my god, yes! And I think like if you had to like put feats on Dizzy, that's probably one of them. That's a feat of Dizzy's right there. Like, survived an attack by Mira's elite guard. And one of the only two survivors. I'd say that's a feat if I've never ever seen one. They make it through. They finish up with Char. They get the fuel that they were promised, begrudgingly, but they get it. And they leave and make their way next to the sub. Now, the sub is being held over at Endeavor. So the Endeavor port is basically like where you have like the big military ships, and that's where they have one of the subs there that they learn about. And they drive right into there. They don't even go covert or anything. They plow through the front door, they unload and take out the locust up there, and they start making their way through the different docks to figure out where the sub is. They come through the first one and find there's nothing there, just a rusted out ship, I believe. And they continue to go, and they make it finally to the next one after fighting off more locusts, and that's where they find it. It's actually held in very good condition. It just needs some replacement parts. I believe it was a rudder it needed. I believe it was a replacement rudder and the fuel. So they go through and do that, and Jace is like, I thought we'd be like going in this giant ship or something, this giant sub. And Dizzy tells him, no, it's a lot better if it's small. It's a lot easier to get around and not be seen. So Dizzy stays behind while the rest of the Delta team go through and find the parts and the fuel for him, and he stays to start getting everything fixed up and repaired. And when they come back with everything, he finally gets everything repaired and ready to go, and he says, okay, we're all set, let's get this thing going, where he gets it loaded up and ready to go down one of the chutes that'll lead to the ocean. While they're getting it there, they fight off all of these locusts that are in their way while he's just trying to get it lined up and in. Once they finally get into the water, everyone boards, and that's when they make their way from Endeavor and they start heading to Azura through the Serrano Ocean. During the entire time that they're going through the ocean, like and again, this speaks volumes about his piloting skills. I never knew, like, for subs you do that in the Merchant Navy, but apparently they had subs because he knows how to pilot this thing. You know, they're going through and fighting these giant sea beasts that are attacking them. They fight off a Leviathan and get away from that. They traverse through minefields, a sunken city, and Dizzy's just going through all of this. They go through the Maelstrom at one point, and they find the secret entrance, and honestly, if you're talking about just skill, that takes a lot of skill that Dizzy just did there. And he's just like, yeah, Merchant Navy. I can go through, I can take a wartime vessel and bring it through the ocean, but, you know, Merchant Navy. Props to him. But they do make it through. They get to the secret entrance of Azura. They enter Azura. Once they go up, it's actually said by Marcus, okay, Dizzy, I need you to take the sub, go back under, and if we need an emergency evac, we need you to be ready to get us out of here. Where Dizzy says, yeah, sure, we can do that. And he actually does take the sub back under. Later on, when the rest of Delta, like, you have Baird and you have Cole meet up and they ask where's Dizzy and everyone, they do tell him, like, Dizzy's with the sub, he's under right now, Dizzy is still fine. And then towards the end of the war, when you have Sam and Jace that are off with the rest of the soldiers, Dizzy does re-emerge at that point. We don't see it, but he does re-emerge, and he does make his way out to the outside of the tower with everyone else, where it's the closing act of 3. It's the end of the war, where Marcus is sitting on the beach, just like, what do we have now? And Anya tells him we have it tomorrow. And Dizzy is one of the main characters sitting there watching over all of this, seeing the sunset, realizing that, yes, the war is over, there is a tomorrow now. And that's all we really get of Dizzy. Like, there's nothing really after that except speculation, really. There's nothing else. Like, the interperiod war we get, which, you know, Dizzy made it to the end of the war, so technically he makes it into the interperiod war, and that's 25 years of peace. Now, with Dizzy's age, I don't believe Dizzy is still alive by the current events of the game. I don't think he's around anymore. I think it would be fine if he wasn't. I think, honestly, that's okay. Because, I mean, he has his daughters. He made it to the end of the war. There's a future for his daughters. I think Dizzy would be content. I think Dizzy would be fine living out his days and just peacefully going. I think he probably did go peacefully. But I imagine, like, later on in the games, maybe we do come across Marilyn and Teresa, and we hear what happened to Dizzy, like Marilyn, Teresa, Wallin. Maybe they're playable characters. And we learn that Dizzy, you know, passed away very peacefully. He got to spend his time with his daughters. You know, they got to rebuild somewhere. I imagine after the war is done, Dizzy probably did retire from the COG. I don't think he would stick around. Like, his girls are safe, the war is over. Much like Jace, I think he just retired. I think he was like, you know, I'm already this old. Because by the time of the end of the game, I want to say he's probably in his mid to late 50s. Maybe he's hitting his 60s. I mean, 25 years later, like, yeah, Hoffman's still around, but Hoffman is very elderly. Maybe Dizzy's around, but I could see Dizzy being gone and just being like, you know, I live my life well, my girls are fine. Or maybe he's alive. Maybe he's just that old coot in the mountains drinking moonshine like, hooey, girls. Would you look at these fine fellas coming on over to look for some help right here. Maybe maybe he's still around. He's just a kooky old man. But I think Dizzy passing, I would be okay with. He's my favorite character and I love him to death. But if he were to die during the inner period, I think he went peacefully during a time of peace. I would be very happy for him. Like, he didn't have to see the world going crazy again. I would be all right. So that's going to do it for Dizzy's video. Again, this is really a thank you to Peter Jason. I wanted to make Dizzy's video in honor of Peter because of the fact that I wanted to save this video, but with his passing, with my favorite character's voice actor dying, I felt it was only right to finally cover Dizzy. So I want to thank everyone for watching. Thank everyone for making things possible. Thank the patrons for making things possible. And also thank you to Peter Jason for making Dizzy possible. I love everyone to death, and I will see all of you in the next Gear Talk. Again, rest in peace, Mr. Jason. Everything that you accomplished in this world, you earned in the end. I thank you for everything. Everyone have a good one. Later.